Sometimes life feels unfair. Some people are born into comfort, while others are born into struggle. And then there are people like Ethan Cole, a young man who had every reason to give up, but chose not to. Ethan was only 22 years old, but his life already looked hopeless. His father was battling a mental illness. His mother had moved on and married a wealthy landlord in Texas, leaving Ethan behind. He didn't have a safety net, a family to lean on, or even a clear path forward. At that age, most people are finishing college, starting careers, or making memories with friends. But Ethan, he was working long shifts in a pesticide factory, barely able to put food on the table. His pay was so low that some nights he went to bed hungry. And then came the day that changed everything. The factory where he worked shut down without warning. One morning he arrived at the gates and saw a piece of paper taped to the wall. Just 3 words: "Factory is closed." That was it. No job, no money, no hope. Ethan stood there, staring at the notice, feeling the world collapse around him. Other workers were crying, shouting, begging for answers. But Ethan didn't say a word. He just stood still, too shocked to even move. He had nothing left, and yet inside him, there was something no one could take away. He had a gift. Ethan wasn't a writer, he wasn't educated, and he wasn't trained in any fancy skill. But he had a natural talent: storytelling. Whenever he spoke, people listened. Whenever he told a story, people forgot their pain. He had the rare power to make someone laugh, cry, or believe again, just with his words. One night, when Ethan was at his lowest, his neighbor and close friend, Sophia Bennett, sat with him. Sophia was a professor, 40 years old, wise, kind, and unmarried. She saw something in Ethan that he couldn't see in himself. She said, "Ethan, your stories can heal people. You may not have money, but you have a gift, and that gift is worth more than gold. Share it with the world." At first, Ethan didn't believe her. How could stories pay bills? How could words fill his empty stomach? But Sophia believed in him more than anyone else ever had. She gave him her old smartphone and told him to start recording his stories. That was the night Ethan's life began to change. He decided he would no longer let poverty define him. He would use his voice, his imagination, and his gift to create a new future. This is the story of how a boy who once had nothing turned one simple idea into a $1 million success. Life has a way of testing people before it blesses them. Some are born into privilege, some into poverty, but only a few are born with a gift that can turn pain into power. Ethan Cole was one of them. At just 22 years old, he had already lived through more heartbreak than most people face in a lifetime. Ethan wasn't born into wealth. His father had once been a hardworking man, but life had broken him. Years of financial failure, rejection, and pressure had left his father struggling with a psychological illness. Some days he was calm, other days he was lost in his own world, speaking to voices only he could hear. Ethan loved his father deeply, but as a boy he never knew which version of his father he would come home to. His mother, unable to cope with the chaos, had remarried. She found stability with a landlord in Texas, a man who had property, power, and money. For her, it was an escape. For Ethan, it was abandonment. She left him behind with his father, choosing a safer life for herself, instead of standing in the storm with her son. So Ethan grew up with little money and little security. By the time he was old enough to understand life, he had already learned its hardest lesson. Sometimes the people who should protect you are the ones who leave. At school, Ethan never felt like he belonged. He wasn't the smartest kid in class. He didn't have fancy clothes or money for trips. While others dreamed of college, Ethan dreamed of survival. His notebooks were filled not with lessons, but with scribbled stories, small tales he imagined to escape his reality. Sometimes they were about heroes who rescued families. Sometimes they were about rich men who started with nothing. And sometimes, secretly, they were about a boy like him who found love, success, and respect in a world that had given him none. But nobody paid attention to Ethan's gift. Teachers told him to focus on math and science, not daydreams. Friends told him stories wouldn't feed his stomach. Even his mother, before leaving, once told him, "Ethan, words are cheap. You need a real job." So Ethan worked. At just 18, he found employment in a pesticide factory. The job was hard, the pay was small, and the smell of chemicals never left his clothes. His hands became rough from the machines, his back sore from the heavy lifting. Every day, he woke up before sunrise, ate whatever leftovers he could find, and walked to work with tired feet. But Ethan never complained, because even though his body was breaking, he believed hard work was the only way out. He thought, if I stay long enough, if I prove myself, maybe I'll earn enough to change my life. For 4 years, he gave everything to that factory. He became known as one of the most reliable workers. While others took breaks, Ethan kept going. While others laughed during lunch, Ethan sat quietly, saving every dollar he could. He dreamed of one day moving out of his father's small broken house and building a place of his own. But then, one ordinary morning, everything ended. Ethan walked to the factory gates as usual. The air was heavy, the sky gray. But instead of the usual buzz of machines, there was silence. Workers gathered in confusion. A piece of paper hung on the front gate with 3 cold words printed in black ink: "Factory is closed." That was it. No warning. No explanation. No compensation. Years of sweat and sacrifice disappeared overnight. Ethan stood frozen. Around him, men shouted in anger, women wept, and families worried about how they would feed their children. Ethan felt the weight of the world pressing on his chest. He had no savings, no backup plan, no mother to turn to, no father who could guide him. For the first time, he felt truly invisible. That night, he walked home in silence. His father sat in a chair, staring blankly at the wall, lost in another episode of his illness. Ethan didn't even bother to explain what had happened. What was the point? His father couldn't fix it. His mother wouldn't care. And the world certainly wasn't waiting to save him. He lay on his bed in the dark, staring at the ceiling, his stomach empty. He thought about ending it all. What was the point of living when there was no way out? But deep inside, a tiny voice whispered, "Not yet. Your story isn't over." And that voice reminded him of the one person who had always believed in him, Sophia Bennett. Sophia was his neighbor, a 40-year-old professor at a local college. Unlike most adults who dismissed Ethan as just another poor boy with no future, Sophia saw something in him. She noticed how he could tell stories that made even sad people smile. She noticed how his imagination could turn even the dullest evening into a magical one. Sophia herself had never married. She was intelligent, compassionate, and carried an air of quiet strength. To Ethan, she was more than just a neighbor. She was a mentor, a friend, and sometimes even the mother figure he had lost. The day after the factory closed, Sophia found Ethan sitting outside, his head buried in his hands. "Ethan," she said softly, "what's wrong?" He lifted his head, his eyes tired and red. "It's over, Sophia. The factory shut down. I've got nothing now. No job, no money, nothing." She sat beside him and looked him straight in the eyes. "You have more than you think." Ethan shook his head. "What do I have? Look at me. I can't even feed myself. My father is sick. My mother is gone. I can't afford rent, let alone dreams." Sophia leaned closer. "Ethan, you have a gift. Do you know how rare it is to hold people's attention the way you do? When you speak, people listen. When you tell a story, people forget their problems. That is power, Ethan. And power can change everything." He frowned. "Stories don't pay bills. They can," Sophia said firmly, "if you share them with the right people, in the right way. The world is full of people who are broken, lonely, and searching for hope. And you, Ethan, you can give that to them." He stared at her in disbelief. "You think people would actually pay me to tell stories?" "I don't just think," she said with a smile. "I know. But first, you have to believe in yourself." She reached into her bag and handed him her old smartphone. "Take this. It's not new, but it works. Start recording your stories. Share them. Post them. Let the world hear your voice." Ethan held the phone like it was a treasure. No one had ever believed in him enough to invest in his dreams. In that moment, something inside him lit up. That night, for the first time since the factory closed, Ethan didn't cry himself to sleep. Instead, he sat awake, holding the phone, imagining the stories he could tell. Stories of survival, of hope, of love, of second chances. Stories that might remind someone, somewhere, that they weren't alone. It wouldn't be easy. He had no followers, no money, and no experience. But he had something the world couldn't ignore, a voice that could heal. And so, From the ashes of failure, a new journey began. Ethan had never recorded himself before. The idea felt strange. Who would want to listen to a poor boy from a broken home? Still, Sophia's words kept echoing in his mind. You can heal people with your stories. So one quiet night, with only the dim light of a table lamp, he opened the phone camera. His heart raced. His hands trembled. But he hit record. Hello, he began awkwardly. I'm not famous. I'm not rich. But maybe I can tell you something that helps you feel a little better tonight. And then, without script or notes, Ethan told a story. He spoke about a man who carried heavy stones every day, thinking they were his burden. But one day, he realized those stones could also build a bridge to freedom. The story wasn't polished, but it was real. His voice cracked, his eyes shined, and for the first time, Ethan let the world see his heart. When he posted the video, he expected nothing. Yet within a day, a stranger left a comment. I really needed this tonight. Thank you. That one comment changed everything. It was proof that his words mattered. And once Ethan knew that, he couldn't stop. Ethan started making more videos, short stories about courage, hope, and healing. At first, only a few people watched. But slowly, his audience grew. Soon, messages started arriving. One night, an older man reached out. He offered to pay Ethan for a private story session. Ethan couldn't believe it. Someone was willing to pay for his voice. He agreed, nervous but excited. The man invited him to his home. When Ethan arrived, he noticed the man's eyes lingering on him too long. After Ethan finished the story, the man leaned forward and said, You're handsome, Ethan. Stay the night, and I'll double your fee. Ethan froze. Shame and anger burned in his chest. He had come to share hope, not to be treated like an object. He stood up, refused the offer, and left the house without looking back. On the street, his heart pounded, but his spirit stayed strong. Never again, he told himself. I'll tell stories, but on my terms. Another time, a 40-year-old woman became obsessed with him. She praised his stories but began asking for more personal, romantic tales, trying to blur the line between storytelling and intimacy. Ethan realized he was being trapped, and it scared him. These moments almost broke him. He thought about quitting, about hiding his gift again. But then Sophia reminded him, Ethan, every gift faces tests. Don't let a few people ruin the chance to change many lives. To protect himself, Ethan made a bold move. Instead of visiting clients' homes, he began renting a small table at a high-class hotel in the city. At first, people looked at him strangely. Who was this young man, sitting with nothing but a chair, a notebook, and a soft voice? But slowly, curious guests stopped to listen. He told a story about a woman who carried grief like a heavy coat until she learned to set it down. Another time, he shared a tale about a boy who planted seeds in dry soil until one finally grew into a tree. Word spread. Soon, more and more people came to the hotel, not just for coffee or dinner, but to hear Ethan. The hotel manager noticed that business was improving. Tables filled up, guests stayed longer, and the atmosphere buzzed with life. Instead of asking Ethan to leave, the manager said, Stay. You're bringing something priceless here. For Ethan, this was a turning point. No longer was he running to clients' homes fearing danger. Now he had a safe stage, a growing audience, and most importantly, respect. With each passing week, Ethan's confidence grew. His stories became sharper, more personal. He learned to listen carefully to each client before speaking. If someone said, I feel invisible, Ethan would reply with a story about a bird whose song was ignored until it sang in the night, when the world finally heard it. If someone said, I feel broken, Ethan would tell of a pot that was cracked but watered flowers along the path with every leak. His stories weren't just words, they were mirrors, reflecting the listener's pain but also showing them hope. One evening, a businessman listened to Ethan and said, Young man, you're charging too little. You don't know your worth. Raise your price. At first, Ethan was hesitant, but he remembered Sophia's advice. If you don't value yourself, no one else will. So he doubled his fee. To his surprise, clients didn't leave, they respected him more. Within 6 months, Ethan went from barely surviving to earning more than he had ever imagined. His clients weren't just paying with money. Some gave him gifts, a gold watch, expensive clothes, even a new phone to help him record better. One day, Sophia herself gave him a top-of-the-line smartphone, smiling proudly. "Now you can reach the world," she said, and Ethan did. He started video calls with clients in other states: New York, California, Florida. Through social media, his voice traveled far beyond Texas. People who had never met him wrote messages saying, "Your story saved me from depression, or I was about to give up. But you gave me hope." For the first time in his life, Ethan wasn't just surviving, he was living his purpose. But deep inside, he knew this was just the beginning. Ethan sat in the hotel lobby one evening, looking around the crowded room. Every table was full. People weren't there for food or drinks, they were there for him. A poor boy who once worked in a pesticide factory was now the heartbeat of a luxury hotel. And yet, Ethan never forgot where he had come from. With his growing income, Ethan made smart choices. He remembered the nights when his family had no food, when his father couldn't afford medicine. He vowed never to let poverty return. Instead of wasting money on useless luxuries, Ethan saved. With Sophia's guidance, he started investing in real estate. First, it was a small shop in the local market. Then another. Soon, he owned several shops that provided steady income. A year later, he bought his first piece of land, then an apartment building. By the time he turned 24, Ethan had built a small empire. From nothing, he now had everything. A luxury home with glass windows and white walls. Expensive cars parked in the driveway. A lifestyle he had once only seen on TV. But none of this came from luck, it came from pain, perseverance, and the courage to use his gift. Money brought comfort. But Ethan's heart longed for something deeper, to heal his father. The man who had once been broken by psychological illness was now surrounded by hope. Ethan paid for the best doctors, bought the best medicines, and most importantly, spent time with him. Each night, Ethan sat by his father's bed and told him stories the same way he once told strangers. Stories of strength, forgiveness, and resilience. Slowly, his father's eyes regained light. He smiled again. He even began walking outside, enjoying the fresh air. One evening, his father whispered, "Son, you've given me life again. I thought I was finished, but you proved that hope can heal even the deepest wounds." Those words were worth more to Ethan than all the money he had earned. By now, Ethan's name had traveled far. Through video calls, he was telling stories to people all across the world. From New York to Los Angeles, from London to Dubai, people wanted to hear the young storyteller, who spoke like a mirror to their hearts. Every session was unique. Ethan never repeated himself. He listened carefully, then crafted a new story on the spot. Clients were stunned. "How do you do it?" they asked. Ethan smiled and replied, "Every person carries a story inside them. I just help bring it out." His authenticity made him different from others. While social media was filled with polished motivational speakers, Ethan remained raw, natural, and deeply human. People felt safe with him. They didn't just pay for stories, they paid for healing. Through it all, one person stood beside him: Sophia Bennett. The professor who first believed in him, who gave him confidence when the world gave him nothing. Sophia was older, wiser, and grounded. She wasn't dazzled by his money or fame. Instead, she kept reminding him of humility. When Ethan bought his first luxury car, Sophia smiled and said, "Nice car. But remember, a kind word can take you further than any engine." Over time, their bond deepened. They laughed together, argued like friends, and dreamed like partners. Sophia had never married, and for years she had lived a quiet life dedicated to teaching. Ethan's energy reignited her spirit. One evening, after a long storytelling session, Ethan confessed, "Sophia, I wouldn't be here without you. You didn't just give me an idea, you gave me hope when I had none." Her eyes softened. "Ethan, you always had it inside you. I just helped you see it." With fame came temptations. Wealthy clients offered him outrageous sums for private time, sometimes with hidden motives. But Ethan never wavered. He remembered his vow after the early experiences: "I will tell stories, but I will never sell myself." This integrity only made people admire him more. He wasn't just a storyteller anymore, he was a symbol of strength, of staying true in a world that tried to buy everything. Years passed. Ethan was no longer the scared boy from the factory. He was a man respected, wealthy, and full of purpose. Yet something was missing. One night, he sat in his luxury house. looking at the stars through the wide glass windows. His thoughts drifted to Sophia. She had given him everything: guidance, wisdom, faith, love. She was his anchor in storms and his mirror in success. At that moment, Ethan made a decision. He wanted to spend his life with her. The next day, he invited Sophia to dinner at the very hotel where his journey began. After dessert, he stood, took her hand, and said, "Sophia, people told me I'd never succeed. People told me stories couldn't feed me. But you told me to try. You believed when no one else did. And today, I want to tell the greatest story of my life with you. Will you marry me?" Tears filled Sophia's eyes. She had never imagined such words from the boy she once encouraged. But deep inside, she had always loved him, not for his looks, not for his money, but for his heart. She whispered, "Yes, Ethan, 1,000 times yes." Their wedding was simple but beautiful. Ethan's father, now healthy, walked proudly beside him. Guests included clients, friends, and strangers whose lives Ethan had touched with his stories. As Ethan looked around, he realized something profound: his wealth was not in the houses, shops, or cars. His true wealth was in the lives he had changed, the hope he had spread, and the love he had found. From poverty to prosperity, from rejection to respect, Ethan's journey was proof that even the darkest beginnings could lead to the brightest endings. And now, with Sophia by his side, he knew this was not the end of his story, just the start of a new chapter. Ethan stood at the balcony of his new home. The city lights stretched far into the night, like 1,000 tiny stars laid out across the earth. For a moment, he closed his eyes and remembered. He remembered the cold nights in a broken house. He remembered his father's silence when illness stole his voice. He remembered working in the pesticide factory until his hands cracked and bled. He remembered the hunger, the loneliness, the shame. And he remembered the spark the day Sophia Bennett told him, "Your stories can heal." That one idea had changed everything. Soon, Ethan wasn't just telling stories to individuals. He began hosting online sessions with thousands of people at once. His voice reached people across America: students struggling with anxiety, mothers dealing with loneliness, workers who had lost jobs, dreamers afraid to try. Every time, Ethan shared a story crafted from their struggles. He didn't preach. He didn't pretend to be perfect. He simply told stories that mirrored their pain and showed them hope. And people listened. Within 2 years, Ethan was invited to speak at major events. Universities, business seminars, and even global conferences wanted him on stage. But Ethan never lost his humility. Standing on stage in front of thousands, he spoke as if he were speaking to just one friend in need. When people asked Ethan how he turned a single idea into $1 million journey, his answer was simple: number 1. Pain is not the end, it's the beginning. If you're hurting, you're not finished. You're just being prepared. My suffering taught me compassion. Without it, I could never touch hearts. Number 2. Stay authentic. People don't want perfection, they want truth. Be yourself, even when the world tries to sell you something else. Number 3. Money follows value. Don't chase wealth. Chase impact. If you change lives, the money will chase you. Number 4. Guard your dignity. Temptations will come. People will try to buy you, use you, or break you. Don't trade your soul for success. True success is clean. And number 5. Gratitude is everything. No matter how far you rise, remember who helped you, remember where you came from, and stay thankful. Ethan also used his platform to speak against racism and inequality. He remembered how people once looked down on him because of his poverty and background. In America, he saw how Black, white, Hispanic, and Asian communities sometimes stood divided by prejudice. Ethan spoke boldly. Pain doesn't care what color your skin is. Depression doesn't ask if you're rich or poor. Loneliness doesn't check your race before it knocks on your door. We all suffer. We all need healing. And we can all find hope together. His words touched people because they came from experience. He wasn't speaking theory, he was speaking truth born from scars. By the age of 28, Ethan was no longer just a storyteller. He was a leader, a healer, and a symbol of resilience. He owned businesses, invested in real estate, and built a life his younger self could never have imagined. But more than wealth, he built a family. Sophia stood beside him, not just as his wife, but as his partner in every dream. Together, they started a foundation to support young creators who came from poor backgrounds. They funded schools, mental health programs, and community centers. Ethan often said, "I want kids who feel invisible to know they matter. I want them to have a place where their voices can be heard just like mine was." One afternoon, Ethan returned to the small town where his journey began. He walked through the same narrow streets, past the same broken factory, past the same house where his father once lay sick. Children ran up to him, laughing and asking, "Are you the storyteller?" Ethan knelt and smiled. "Yes, and you know what? You're a storyteller too. Every one of you has a story that can change the world." The children's eyes lit up, and Ethan felt tears in his own. This was his mission, not just to tell stories, but to awaken storytellers in others. On his 30th birthday, Ethan sat down to write his own story. Not for money, not for fame, but as a gift to the world. He wrote, "I was once a boy with nothing, no money, no future, no hope. But I discovered something powerful, the ability to turn pain into story, and story into healing. That gift took me from poverty to prosperity, from loneliness to love. If my story can do anything, I hope it proves this: your beginning does not define your ending. No matter how broken you feel, no matter how dark your night is, your story is not finished. And maybe, just maybe, the very thing that hurt you most will become the reason you rise the highest." When he finished, Ethan closed the book, placed it on the table, and smiled. For him, this was never about the money. It was about meaning. And now his legacy would continue everywhere, with everyone, forever. People love to judge the poor, but they never ask why poverty exists. They say, "Work harder." But tell me, how hard can a man work when he has nothing to start with? Society worships the rich while mocking those who struggle, forgetting that every millionaire was once a dreamer no one believed in. So, I ask you, are we really failures because we didn't inherit wealth? Or is society the failure for measuring our worth only in money? Are we abnormal because we stumble, or are we extraordinary because we rise again after every fall? And why is it that when someone from nothing becomes something, the world calls it luck instead of courage? This is not just his journey, it is a question for you. If he could turn an idea into success, what excuse do you have left? The truth is simple: life will never hand you happiness. You either fight for it or you surrender. So I'll leave you with this: will you keep waiting for the world to change? Or will you finally decide to change your world? People love to judge the poor, but they never ask why poverty exists. They say, "Work harder." But tell me, how hard can a man work when he has nothing to start with? Society worships the rich while mocking those who struggle, forgetting that every millionaire was once a dreamer no one believed in. So, I ask you, are we really failures because we didn't inherit wealth? Or is society the failure for measuring our worth only in money? Are we abnormal because we stumble, or are we extraordinary because we rise again after every fall? And why is it that when someone from nothing becomes something, the world calls it luck instead of courage? This is not just his journey, it is a question for you. If he could turn an idea into success, what excuse do you have left? The truth is simple: life will never hand you happiness. You either fight for it or you surrender. So I'll leave you with this: will you keep waiting for the world to change? Or will you finally decide to change your world?